The scientist at the Special Operations Executive Research Station looked at a tube of industrial grinding paste and saw something most people would miss. Not a lubricant, not a tool, a weapon. Carborundum is silicon carbide, one of the hardest synthetic substances ever made. Mix it into grease in the right concentration and you get something invisible and patient. Something that looks exactly like ordinary lubricant. You pack it into a machine's oil points and the machine starts destroying itself from the inside. Every revolution of every shaft grinds metal against metal. The oil pressure looks fine. The gauges look normal. Nothing appears wrong until the engine simply locks up, seizes solid, and stops. Mid-ocean, 500 miles from the nearest port. 50 men inside a steel tube with no way home. That was the idea. And in the occupied French port of Lorient, starting in 1942, a quiet network of dock workers, engineers, and resistance contacts began putting it into practice. The Germans built bomb-proof concrete bunkers 7 meters thick to protect their submarines. The bunkers worked. Not a single Allied bomb penetrated them. But the men who maintained the boats inside those bunkers every day were not Germans. They were French. And some of them had made contact with London. The most sophisticated naval weapon Germany possessed was being killed from the inside by men with dirty hands and ordinary-looking grease. To understand what made this possible, you have to understand how Lorient worked. Before the war, Lorient was a French naval base on the Atlantic coast of Brittany. When Germany overran France in June 1940, Admiral Karl Dönitz moved quickly. He recognized immediately what the French Atlantic ports meant for his submarine campaign. A U-boat sailing from Germany to the North Atlantic shipping lanes lost days of operational time just getting there and back. From Lorient, those transit distances collapsed. The same boat could spend far more time actually hunting. Dönitz sent his engineers immediately. The first U-boat, U-30, docked at Lorient on July 7, 1940, repaired in 7 days, and departed on its next patrol on July 13th. By 1941, construction had begun on the Keraman U-boat base. 3 massive concrete bunker complexes, walls up to 7 meters thick, roofs reinforced to withstand direct bomb hits. When the Royal Air Force eventually dropped more than 15,000 tons of bombs on Lorient, they flattened roughly 90% of the city. The submarine pens absorbed everything. Not one bomb penetrated. Not one boat inside was seriously damaged by bombing. For Dönitz's submarines, Lorient was sanctuary. The boats came in damaged, exhausted, low on fuel. They were repaired, resupplied, sent out again. The turnaround kept the Wolfpack campaign alive. In the early war years, those wolves were extraordinarily effective. In 1942 alone, German submarines sank over 6 million tons of Allied shipping. Tankers, freighters, cargo ships carrying food and steel and oil. The math was simple and terrifying. Germany was sinking ships faster than the Allies could build them. The Type 7 U-boat was the workhorse of this campaign. Not large, not glamorous, but reliable, proven, and deadly. About 67 meters long, a crew of 50 men, 2 massive diesel engines for surface running at 17 knots, electric motors for submerged movement at 8 knots or less. The submarines spent most of every patrol on the surface. The diesel engines were everything. They drove the boat to the hunting grounds. They recharged the batteries. They were the reason the U-boat could function at all. The Germans were meticulous about those engines. Engineer officers checked them obsessively. They knew exactly how much wear was acceptable, what the oil pressure should read at what RPM, what sounds indicated what problems. They had to know. A diesel failure in the middle of the Atlantic was not an inconvenience. It was a death sentence for 50 men. Lorient had the facilities to keep those engines running. The base employed hundreds of French workers, mechanics, welders, electricians, maintenance crews. They spoke French, they went home to French neighborhoods at night, and they watched German submarines come and go from their occupied port every week for 4 years. Some of them decided to do something about it. The Special Operations Executive was created in July 1940 with a single, broad instruction from Winston Churchill. Set Europe ablaze. The organization recruited from everywhere. Former chefs, journalists, electricians, engineers. People who knew France, spoke the language, could pass as locals. They were trained at country estates from the highlands to the New Forest to kill with their hands, sabotage railways, handle explosives, survive interrogation. And they were given tools. Some of these tools were obvious. Plastic explosives, detonators, weapons. But the SOE's scientists also developed something less obvious, something that looked completely harmless: carborundum grease, an abrasive grease which, when smeared on the right spot, could bring a locomotive to an immediate standstill. That is the documented description from multiple sources covering SOE weapons development. The concept was straightforward once someone thought of it. Carborundum particles are harder than virtually any metal in a standard mechanical system. Mix them into lubricating grease and they become invisible. The color barely changes. The consistency is similar enough to pass a casual inspection. But when a machine runs on this compound instead of genuine lubricant, the particles work into every bearing surface, every journal, every piston ring, and they grind, continuously, relentlessly, with every revolution of the engine. The machine does not fail immediately. That was the genius of it. It kept working for hours. It passed inspection. It left port. It sailed out of the harbour and across the Bay of Biscay and into the open Atlantic. And then, somewhere that was nowhere, hundreds of miles from any port, the cumulative damage crossed the threshold that metal cannot recover from. Bearings seized. Shafts locked. The engine stopped. SOE agents distributed this compound through resistance networks across occupied France. They used it on locomotives. Ben Cowburn, one of SOE's most effective agents in France, organized the sabotage of aircraft engine production at Châteauroux by introducing abrasives into the manufacturing process. His network destroyed 6 railway engines at Troyes in the summer of 1943. The principle worked on any machinery with lubrication points: a locomotive, an aircraft engine, a submarine diesel. The resistance network inside Lorient had access to the boats. They had screwdrivers and access to oil filler caps and 15 seconds of privacy when no one was watching. That was enough. And there was one man who gave them something more important than the grease itself. He gave them access to everything. His neighbors in Lorient thought he was a traitor. Jacques Stosskopf was 41 years old in 1940 when Germany occupied France. He was an Alsatian born in Paris to a family from the German-speaking border region between France and Germany. He spoke German fluently, with no accent. He held the rank of chief engineer in the French Naval Construction Service and had spent years building ships at Lorient. When the Germans arrived and took over the base, they needed French engineers who understood the facilities. Stosskopf was the most qualified person available. He had designed parts of the base himself, so Stosskopf stayed. He pretended to collaborate. He became, in the eyes of the local French population, a man who had chosen comfort and safety over his country. He oversaw work. He attended German meetings. He earned the confidence of German naval officers who appreciated his expertise and his fluent German. He was promoted to Deputy Director of Naval Construction at the Lorient Arsenal. Beginning in September 1940, he was feeding information to Allied forces every week. Through his contacts in the Alliance Resistance Network, Stosskopf reported on every submarine movement through the base: the name of each boat, the name of its commanding officer, the direction of its patrol. He described submarine routes and structural details of the base. He promoted sabotage operations within the workforce he supervised. According to documented records of his activities, at least 18 documented sabotage actions took place within the Lorient Arsenal under his oversight. They targeted construction materials, welding quality, and repair timelines for Type 7 and Type 9 U-boats, delaying individual submarines by weeks or months in some cases. He did this for nearly 4 years. In February 1944, a captured member of the Alliance network gave up Stosskopf's name under torture. The Gestapo arrested him. Because of his apparent collaboration and his status as a senior official, his French neighbors assumed he had received a promotion and been transferred to Germany for greater responsibilities. The reality was quite different. Stosskopf was tortured by the Gestapo. He was transported to Germany under the Nacht und Nebel program, the Night and Fog program, in which prisoners simply vanished. He was held at Natzweiler Struthof concentration camp in Alsace, the only camp built on French territory. On September 1st, 1944, he was shot. He was 45 years old. The Allies were already in France. Liberation was weeks away. He had spent 4 years inside the U-boat base at Lorient, doing what he could, and he died 8 days before the German garrison at Lorient was surrounded by American forces. In July 1946, the French Navy renamed the Lorient submarine base. They called it Base Ingenieur General Stosskopf. His neighbors finally found out who he had actually been. There is one submarine whose documented history shows, in specific and verifiable detail, exactly what this sabotage campaign did to an individual, boat, and the men inside it. U-505 was a Type 9C, a larger ocean-going boat designed for long-range patrols in the South Atlantic and Caribbean. She arrived at Lorient in February 1942 and would spend the next 2 years cycling in and out of the base. Her career became a documented record of what happens when the maintenance you depend on is quietly, systematically being undone. Her story starts before the sabotage. On November 11, 1942, a Royal Air Force Hudson Maritime Patrol aircraft caught U-505 on the surface in the Caribbean Sea. A 250-pound bomb hit the deck directly above the waterline. It killed one officer, wounded another, tore the anti-aircraft gun from its mounting, and severely breached the hull. With the pumps failing and water flooding the engine room, the commanding officer, Commander Peter Schesch, ordered the crew to abandon ship. His engineers refused the order. Chief Petty Officer Otto Fricker led the technical crew in a marathon effort to save the boat. They worked for 2 weeks, keeping her afloat through emergency repairs. Eventually, U-505 limped back to Lorient on reduced power, earning what her crew considered the mixed honor of being the most heavily damaged U-boat to successfully return to port during the war. Repairs took 6 months, which meant 6 months of French dockworkers having access to every system on the boat. U-505 left Lorient on July 1st, 1943, on her 5th patrol. She returned 13 days later after an attack by 3 British destroyers that stalked her for over 30 hours. The damage was limited, but it was enough to send her back into the pens. And then the boat started dying in a different way. U-505's next 4 consecutive patrols were each aborted after only a few days at sea. Every single time, equipment failures forced her back to port. Crew member Hans Goebeler, who later wrote about his service on U-505 in detail, described what they found on each return. On one inspection, engineers discovered that the hull had been compromised through deliberate means. Resistance workers had packed ropes into welding seams, weakening structural integrity in a way that would not be immediately visible, but would show up at sea pressure. On another patrol, investigators found a pencil-thin hole drilled in a diesel fuel tank. Tiny, almost invisible. But as the boat ran, it trailed a thin line of diesel oil across the surface, a line that Allied aircraft could spot for miles. And there was something Goebeler described as strange noises. The crew kept hearing noises from the machinery that had no obvious explanation. Noises that meant something was wrong, somewhere in a system they could not immediately identify. Each time, Schesch turned the boat around. The documented record of his patrols confirms this in specific detail. He returned early from his 4th patrol due to strange noises. His 5th patrol, same. His 6th, his 7th, his 8th, 6 consecutive patrols, aborted. The German commanders record notes these directly. Sabotage damage before his 3rd patrol, for which several French dockyard workers were subsequently shot. And still, the returns continued. The dock workers who were identified and shot were replaced by other workers who continued. The psychological effect on Schesch was destroying him. He had arrived at U-505 with a high reputation. He had been trained as first watch officer under one of Germany's most successful commanders. He was expected to be an ace. Instead, he had sunk 1 ship over the course of 6 patrols. He was becoming a joke. When U-505 returned from one aborted mission, someone had painted a sign in the docking area, U-505's hunting ground. At a time when other boats were being sunk with their entire crews, other commanders at Lorient were laughing at him. One of them made a comment that Schesch apparently overheard. There is one commander who will always come back, Schesch. On October 9th, 1943, U-505 finally departed on her 10th patrol. After 6 consecutive failures, she made it out of the Bay of Biscay. 14 days later, British destroyers found her east of the Azores. She submerged and endured a prolonged depth charge attack. Goebeler was in the boat when it happened. He described it in his memoir. The lights were out. The explosions had knocked men off their feet. He looked over and saw the commanding officer slowly begin to lean. Another crew member came out and carried Zizek to his bunk. When the lights came on, Goebeler saw the blood. Scheck had shot himself in the head with his Walther PPK pistol in the control room during the attack. The depth charges were so loud that no one had heard the shot. Peter Scheck is recorded as the only known submarine commanding officer to commit suicide during a war patrol in the entire Second World War. First Watch Officer Paul Meyer took command. He rode out the rest of the attack and brought U-505 back to Lorient. He was not commended for saving the boat. He was only, in the Kriegsmarine's language, absolved from all blame. The German Navy gave U-505 a new commander, a man named Harold Lang. His first patrol on the boat lasted 9 days. His second patrol began March 16, 1944, and lasted 81 days. On June 4, 1944, U-505 was found by American Task Group 22.3, a hunter-killer group built around the escort carrier Guadalcanal. Depth charges forced her to the surface. Her crew abandoned ship in what some later described as panic. Sailors threw themselves into the water before the boat was even significantly damaged. A boarding party from the destroyer escort Pillsbury got aboard and seized the boat before she could be scuttled. They captured an intact Enigma machine, the month's Kriegsmarine codebooks, a variety of secret documents. Some historians have argued that the complete collapse of morale across years of sabotage-driven humiliation explains what happened that day. That 50 men, who had been ground down by 6 consecutive patrol abortions, by the suicide of their captain in front of them, by years of a boat that would not work, were simply not capable of the disciplined action required to scuttle properly when the moment came. U-505 sits today in the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, Illinois. She is one of only 4 surviving Second World War German submarines in the world. The ropes packed into her welding seams, the drilled fuel tank, the contaminated oil. You would not know to look for these things, but they are part of what she is. Picture what it meant to be the engineer officer on a U-boat sailing out of Lorient in 1943. You had personally verified the oil. You had walked the engine room, checked every system, confirmed every gauge. You had trusted the French workers because you had to. You could not service the boat yourself. There were too many systems, too many hours of work required, too few German technicians for everything that needed doing. The boat sailed. 3 days out, 5 days. The engines running steady, the Atlantic grey and cold and enormous around you. The gauges looked normal. Then the oil pressure gauge moved in a way it was not supposed to move, just slightly, just a fraction below the line. You would watch it, check again, still dropping. You went back into the heat and noise of the engine room and looked at everything you could see. The bearings appeared fine. The oil appeared normal. Nothing obviously wrong, but the pressure kept dropping. Herbert Werner, who commanded submarines throughout the Battle of the Atlantic and documented his experiences afterward, described the specific quality of fear that mechanical failure produced. Depth charges were terrifying, but they were immediate. You either survived the next few minutes or you did not. Mechanical failure was slower. It gave you time. Time to think about what was coming. Time to understand that you were in the open Atlantic, that there were Allied aircraft patrolling every corridor back to France, that calling for help on the radio meant broadcasting your exact position to every Allied direction-finding station within range. You did the arithmetic. The batteries would run on electric motors for a few hours at reduced speed. You could not make it back to France on battery power alone. You needed the diesels. So you turned around. You pointed the boat southeast and ran whatever was, left of the engines as carefully as you could, nursing the pressure, watching the gauges, praying the bearings held together for another 400 miles. When you got back to Lorient and the technical investigation began, the oil looked fine, the right color, the right viscosity on casual inspection. Nothing obviously wrong with it. That was the point. The Germans understood eventually that French workers were sabotaging the boats. They increased security. They brought German technicians to perform final checks on critical systems. They separated groups of French workers and restricted access to certain areas of the boats. The abortions continued. You cannot watch every person who touches every lubrication point on a submarine that has dozens of systems requiring regular maintenance. The access points are everywhere. The windows of opportunity are brief and constant. A man checking an oil filler cap for 60 seconds is not doing anything suspicious. He is doing his job. Some commanders who had experienced mechanical failures at sea developed something that had no official name in the German Navy, a bone-deep certainty that the next patrol would end the same way. that something was being done to the boat that no amount of investigation could fully find or fix. That the men working in the pens every day, who smiled and seemed cooperative and said the right things to the German supervisors, were doing something to the engines at night. Some of those commanders were right. In 1939, approximately 40,000 German men served in the U-boat arm of the Kriegsmarine over the course of the war. By the war's end, 28,000 of them were dead, 3 in 4. This was known within the service, imperfectly and unofficially, by the men who sailed. You counted boats. You had friends on boats that did not return. You watched the faces at the base after each patrol. You learned to read which crews were missing in a way that did not require anyone to say anything directly. Peter Czech's father received notification from the Kriegsmarine that his son had died in action. The language was formal and appropriate. It said nothing about a control room and a pistol and the lights going out during a depth charge attack. The families of men killed in French sabotaged boats received similarly formal notifications. The Kriegsmarine described equipment failures at sea in the language of misfortune. Some of those failures had human hands behind them. The dock workers who were caught were executed. Their families knew. The other workers at Lorient knew. They continued anyway. Hans Goebeler, the crew member of U-505 who wrote about his service after the war, described what happened when he personally helped identify one of the saboteurs. He had overheard a man gloating to friends in a tavern about what he had done to a submarine. Goebeler reported it. The man was arrested. Goebeler spent the rest of his life with that knowledge. He had turned in a man who was executed for resisting occupation of his country. The statistics of the sabotage campaign at Lorient cannot be precisely counted. What is documented is the pattern. At least 18 verified sabotage actions inside the base. Multiple boats experiencing the kind of mechanical failures during the same period that had no other obvious explanation. U-505's 4 consecutive patrol abortions, with investigators finding drilled fuel tanks and packed weld seams each time. The broader documented reality that the resistance network at Lorient, coordinated by Stosskopf from the inside for nearly 4 years, was active, organized, and in contact with London throughout. The Grokopedia analysis of Stosskopf's documented activities noted that his intelligence transmissions on submarine departures from Lorient enabled Allied forces to intercept and sink several submarines in the Atlantic, contributing to cumulative attrition. Sabotage under his oversight included actions targeting construction materials, welding quality, and repair timelines for Type 7 and Type 9 boats, delaying individual vessels by weeks or months. These are not estimates or generalizations. They are documented in French post-war assessments and historical accounts of the base. Quantifying exactly how many patrol abortions resulted from contaminated oil, how many boats put back to port because of strange noises that were the beginning of bearing failure, is impossible now. The records that might tell you precisely are gone, or were never kept in a form that survived. What we know is that boats based at Lorient during this period were experiencing problems that those not based at Lorient were not experiencing at the same rate. And we know that French workers with access to SOE-supplied methods were inside those boats every time they came back to port. U-505 was the most dramatically documented case. She was not the only case. The Bloch aircraft factory and what abrasives could do. When SOE agent Ben Cowburn arrived in France in September 1941, one of his first missions was to disrupt production at the Bloch aircraft factory at Châteauroux. His method was not explosives. He persuaded French contacts inside the factory to introduce abrasives into the production line for aircraft engines. He also organized the disruption of high-tension electrical lines at the Iguzon power station, interrupting power transmission. The Bloch operation matters here because it demonstrates exactly how the SOE thought about abrasive sabotage. It was not a one-time use. It was a method designed to be applied by ordinary workers with ordinary access, repeatedly, against machinery that had to work perfectly to be useful. An aircraft engine contaminated with abrasive grinding compound would eventually fail. The failure could happen on the ground during testing, in which case the engine would be replaced and the sabotage reset. Or it could happen in the air, in which case the pilot died. Either way, the operational effect was what the SOE wanted: reduced availability of functional aircraft. Applied to submarine diesel engines, the logic was identical. A contaminated engine might fail during dock testing, requiring replacement. or it might fail at sea. Both outcomes hurt the U-boat campaign. A boat in the repair pens is a boat not hunting convoys. The captured saboteur, Gobela, helped find the documented account from Gobela's testimony is specific and worth sitting with. A French worker at Lorient made the mistake of gloating. He went to a tavern and said something to his friends about what he had done to a submarine. Someone at that table told someone else. Eventually, it reached Gobela, who reported it to German security. That man was arrested. What happened to him afterward is not stated explicitly in the available sources, but the fate of French workers caught sabotaging U-boats at Lorient is not ambiguous. Several were executed. The Nauticopedia record on Peter Schesch confirms this directly. French dockyard workers were shot for the sabotage done to U-505 before Schesch's third patrol. The man Gobela identified may have been among them. Gobela wrote about his service on U-505 after the war. He recalled specific events in detail. He described the sabotage and what it did to the boat. He described the moment Schesch died. He described being captured in June 1944 when the American task group took U-505 intact. He spent the rest of the war in an American prisoner of war camp in isolation from other prisoners because the Navy needed to ensure the Germans did not learn that their Enigma machine had been captured. He did not know why he was isolated. He found out after the war. The story of U-505 contains within it almost every element of what the sabotage campaign was. The French workers, the drilled tanks, the packed welds, the strange noises, the patrol abortions, the commander cracking, and at the end, a boat so thoroughly demoralized that when the Americans came for her, no one could properly scuttle her. The U-502 oil leak. A detail in the Naval History magazine account of Operation Drumbeat in January 1942 is worth noting here. Among the group of Type 9 submarines Dunitz dispatched for the opening of the American campaign, one, U-502, was forced to abort her patrol after suffering a major oil leak. The cause of that specific oil leak is not documented in surviving records. It may have been mechanical failure unrelated to sabotage. U-502 was not based at Lorient for this patrol. What the detail demonstrates is that oil leaks and mechanical failures were recognized hazards of U-boat operations even before the sabotage campaign at Lorient reached its peak. The sabotage campaign at Lorient exploited an existing vulnerability. The oil system of a diesel submarine was a weak point. A deliberate weakness in that oil system was extraordinarily difficult to distinguish from natural failure. That ambiguity was itself a weapon. If a commander could not be certain whether his engine problems were mechanical bad luck or deliberate sabotage, he could not trust his boat. He could not trust the maintenance. He could not trust the base. The last boat, out of Lorient. When Allied forces surrounded Lorient in August 1944, the remaining submarines at the base were evacuated north to Norway. The last U-boat to escape was U-853, which sailed on August 27, 1944. By then, Jacques Stosskopf was in Natzweiler Struthof, 5 days from his execution. The man who had spent 4 years feeding information about every boat that entered and left Lorient did not know that the base he had spent 4 years undermining had just been surrounded. He would have been dead 5 days before Lorient formally fell. U-853, the last boat to leave, was sunk on May 5, 1945, 3 days before Germany surrendered, 1 day before VE Day. Her entire crew died. The Lorient sabotage was not operating in isolation. It was part of a broader network of actions being coordinated through SOE and resistance contacts across occupied France. What Stosskopf's intelligence actually did. Stosskopf was not only organizing sabotage, he was, every week, reporting on submarine departures from Lorient to his Alliance network contact. The name of the boat, the commanding officer, the general area of the patrol. This information went to London. London used it. Whether specific submarines were sunk directly as a result of Stosskopf's departure. Information is difficult to establish with precision. Allied anti-submarine successes in the Bay of Biscay during this period involved many factors. Improved radar, better sonar, long-range aircraft coverage. Isolating which sinkings resulted from Stosskopf's specific intelligence is not possible from the available record. What is documented is that Stosskopf reported consistently for nearly 4 years that Allied forces were intercepting U-boats in the Bay of Biscay at increasing rates during this period. and that the combination of departure intelligence and sabotage-driven mechanical failures created a double threat to every boat sailing from Lorient. The boat left port with systems that might fail, and someone in London might know approximately where it was going. The SOE's abrasive grease in the broader war. The most precisely documented use of SOE carborundum abrasive grease took place not at Lorient, but in Normandy in June 1944. The 2nd SS Panzer Division was one of Germany's most feared armoured formations. It was moving north toward the Normandy beaches after the Allied landings on June 6th. 3-man Jedburgh teams working alongside French resistance fighters got to the rail transport cars carrying the division's vehicles. The National Army Museum records the outcome. The axle lubricant was drained and replaced with abrasive grease. The axles seized. The division was delayed significantly in reaching the invasion beaches. An armoured force that could have threatened the entire Allied landing was stopped not by bombs or naval guns, but by a compound that looked like grease, applied by men with access and 15 seconds of privacy. The principle was identical to what workers at Lorient had been doing to submarine diesel engines. The same material, the same method, the same logic. Machines that ran on abrasive grease destroyed themselves. The difference was the scale. The Lorient campaign ran for years. The effect accumulated slowly. It was harder to see, harder to measure, harder to attribute. But it was there, in patrol abortions and strange noises and commanders who could not trust their own boats. Herbert Werner, on the fear that could not be named. Herbert Werner commanded multiple U-boats during the war and survived. He wrote about the experience after the war. What he described about mechanical failure was specific. A depth charge attack had a beginning and an end. You could survive it, and then it was over. You could catalogue exactly what had happened to your boat, report it to command, receive credit for having endured it. Mechanical failure had no such clarity. You did not know when it had started. You did not know if you had found all of it. You did not know if the repair had fixed it or just delayed the next failure. And if the failure might be deliberate rather than mechanical, you did not know who had caused it or where the next fault had been planted. This uncertainty was corrosive. Werner's accounts of life in the U-boat arm during 1943 and 44 describe a service under multiple kinds of pressure simultaneously. Enemy aircraft, better Allied weapons, growing losses, and a base in occupied France where the maintenance that kept you alive was being done by people who had every reason to want you dead. He did not frame it in those terms, but the weight of that uncertainty is present throughout what he wrote about this period. By May 1943, Admiral Dönitz had reached a conclusion he had not expected to reach. He pulled his boats out of the North Atlantic. In that single month, Germany lost 43 submarines, not in one battle, scattered across the whole Atlantic, across a full calendar month, one after another. The production rate for new submarines could not keep pace with losses at that rate. The training pipeline to replace dead crews could not keep pace either. The math had stopped working. On May 24, 1943, Dönitz transmitted to his remaining captains. He was withdrawing them from the convoy lanes. He described it as temporary. He told them better technology was coming. He said they would return. They never returned in comparable strength. The conventional explanation for what happened to the U-boat campaign in 1943 focuses on technology, new radar, long-range aircraft closing the mid-Atlantic gap, better sonar, the Hedgehog mortar that attacked submarines while they were still below the surface, cracked Enigma codes at Bletchley Park. All of these things were real, and all of them mattered enormously. But the sabotage campaign at Lorient had been bleeding the operational readiness of the U-boat fleet for 2 years before Black May. Every patrol aborted due to mechanical failure was a patrol that sank no ships. Every boat kept in the repair pens for 3 extra weeks was a boat that missed Wolfpack operations. Every commander who could not trust his diesel engines was a commander less willing to press into dangerous areas, less confident in his ability to evade and escape when things went wrong. Dönitz had calculated before the war that 300 operational submarines could strangle Britain's supply, our lines. He believed this. He had done the mathematics carefully. He never had 300. At his peak, in the summer of 1942, he had around 240 operational boats. That sounds close, but operational boats means boats at sea, hunting. At any given moment, some were in transit. Some were in port for replenishment. Some were damaged. Some were in the pens at Lorient with strange noises in their engines and mechanics who could not quite identify what was wrong. The gap between 240 boats and 300 boats was never closed, and some part of that gap, unquantifiable but real, was occupied by French workers with dirty hands and tubes of ordinary-looking grease. On October 4th, 1943, Dönitz tried again. He sent 43 boats back into the North Atlantic with new acoustic torpedoes designed to home in on the engines of convoy escorts. Within weeks, 9 submarines were gone. The escorts had already developed countermeasures. He pulled them back again. The war at sea was over in any meaningful sense. Germany continued sending submarines out because there was nothing else to do. But the battle had been decided. The Lorient sabotage campaign was not a decisive weapon on its own. History rarely produces single, decisive weapons. What it was, precisely, was a demonstration of something that every navy in the world has since had to reckon with. A submarine can be killed before it leaves port. The most sophisticated underwater weapon Germany possessed, shielded behind 7 meters of bomb-proof concrete that survived 15,000 tons of Allied bombs, was vulnerable to a man with a small jar and 15 seconds of access to an oil cap. The concrete bunkers that the Royal Air Force could not destroy were irrelevant. What mattered was who was inside them, touching the boats, every day, with ordinary tools and ordinary-looking materials. Every navy that came after the Second World War studied this. Protecting submarine bases from the kind of quiet, patient destruction that French workers carried out at Lorient became a core element of naval security doctrine. Testing lubricating oil samples before departure, auditing every person with access to critical systems, watching for the drilled hole too small to see easily, the weld that looks normal but has something behind it, the oil that passes visual inspection but carries something no eye can detect. These procedures exist in the maintenance manuals of every submarine force in the world today. They have formal names and official standards and inspection protocols. They are taught to naval engineers as foundational practice. They cost French workers their lives to establish. Stosskopf was executed on September 1st, 1944. He did not know that the base he had spent 4 years undermining was already surrounded by Allied forces. He did not know that the submarines he had helped to cripple and track were no longer hunting convoys. He did not know that the war in the Atlantic was, for all practical purposes, over. The workers who were identified and shot by German security at Lorient did not know that either. They knew only what they could see: U-boats coming and going from their port. Their country occupied, and something they could do about it that fit in the palm of a hand. The base at Lorient was renamed for Stosskopf in 1946. The French who had believed he was a collaborator found out what he had actually done. The names of some of the workers executed by the Germans are not fully preserved in the historical record. What is preserved is the effect of what they did. 6 consecutive patrol abortions on a single boat. A commanding officer who broke under the accumulated strain. A submarine captured intact in the Atlantic with its codebooks and Enigma machine still aboard. The British developed a powder that could bring a machine to a standstill. They gave it to people with access to the machines, and those people, at considerable personal risk, used it. Some came home afterward. Most of the U-boat crews they helped to stop did not.